The BLITZ Kids, as the 1944 University of Utah NCAA champion basketball team was known, were a bunch of young freshmen with a pocket full of luck and endless determination. Facing elimination in the first round of the NIT tournament, this fairy tale story fast became a bestseller.
You know, with the state being so sparsely populated back in those days, to have a championship caliber players come from such a close proximity was really something different. Our team was made up of all Utah people. In fact, Arnie and I was living in Ogden, was the farthest away from Salt Lake City, farthest away from the campus.
Everybody lived within 35 miles. 3 or 4 of the players who played with us in 1944 saw a sheet on the bulletin board, tryouts for the University of Utah basketball team will begin. And they saw it and came out.
Back in '44, there was no recruiting. There was no recruiting budget and no recruiting whatsoever. It was all local players.
I'd been All-State the 2 years I was at Ogden High, and I came down and knocked on Vadel's door and asked him if I could try out for the university team. And I think he asked me if I had my own shoes, and didn't know who I was, really. I came in, I brought a letter from my high school coach and introduced myself. In 1944, the field house was a bedroom. They converted it to a bedroom for the ASTP program.
And so we played at the Desert Gym. In pre-1950 days, the NIT was the big tournament.
Nobody wanted to go to the NCAA in 1944 because it was a cheap tournament. It had been someplace in the Midwest first, and then it was in Kansas City. And of course, everybody wanted to go to New York and play in the Garden and in front of all the national press.
And that's why the NIT at that time was numero uno. It paid more money to the school and had more prestige than the NCAA. If a team were invited both places, they would pick the NIT over the NCAA.
During the war, rubber gear was hard to find, supporters and shoes. When you got to Chicago, you transferred train stations. We lost our gear. You couldn't really go out and buy any. We borrowed some to practice, and a couple of days later they found it. So we're in New York City without any gear, and like I say, only 2 of us had been there. It's a wonderful city to visit for the first time.
Vadel went on bed check the night before. They went on bed check, and he went in and checked, and then he came back to Arnie Farron, who was the team captain, and he said, Wat Masaka is not in his room. And he said, he's not going to play tomorrow unless you get him into his room in the next hour. So Arnie gets up and he goes and looks all the way through the hotel and then goes out to some of the haunts, because these guys had got into a few nightclubs and everything else which they had never seen before and wanted to see in New York. So they thought he might be at one of these nightclubs. So he went in nightclubs. So he's on his feet walking all over for an hour, 2 hours, comes back and decides to go to Watt's room. He goes to Watt's room and Watt's asleep and has been asleep since 10 o'clock. Vadel had bed checked the wrong room. As a result of it, his star player and his team captain was up all night.
We played a Kentucky team, and Vadel bought the first scouting report we'd ever seen for $25 from somebody off the street. And we devised a little plan for one of their guards who didn't score very much. He made all of their points, and we lost.
That night, Vadel got a call from the NCAA saying that Arkansas had a automobile accident and was not able to play in the Western regional of the NCAA.
Vadel called us together and said, we have a chance to go play in the NCAA tournament, or the university has agreed to let us stay a couple of extra days and see New York City. Which would you like to do?
And most of us had never been to New York before.
And our attitude was, why don't we go to Kansas City and play those 2 games and come back?
We were unanimous in wanting to play. We felt like we really would like to redeem ourselves for losing that first game.
And that's what we did. Got on a train and hauled out for a day and a half on the train and played in Kansas City.
They figured Utah was going to get beat, so they asked if they could if Utah would let the other team stay in their hotel room that night because they were going out to the garden and the youths were going home. And so they did that, and of course the youths won the game, and they had to switch rooms. The youths had to get on the train and take off.
They had to pick up their own bags and leave themselves, so it was made us feel a little bit better about it.
Then got back on the train and went back to New York City and played Dartmouth for the finals. Here we are, starting 4 freshmen playing against a team comprised of all Navy and Marine athletes that have been picked from a number of different colleges.
A lot of better players than myself that played for university, but none of them were any luckier than me.
During the war, and we were fighting Japan, I think Watt had to get a visa to leave the state of Utah. And the propaganda movies were pretty terrible about Japanese people. But when we played in Madison Square Garden, I really felt like sports transcended the hatred and envy of war. He was such a good player that the people, the fans there and the people in New York City responded to him as an athlete, not to him as a Japanese American or a Japanese person who we were at war with. And I thought it was a great compliment to what sports can do for elevating people's feelings above what they might normally be. In 1944, during a timeout, you couldn't go to the bench.
When you're sitting out on the floor during timeouts, in those days you weren't allowed to talk to the coach during timeouts, and so you sat out on the floor, just the players. The memory I have is of Herb shooting that shot right from the top of the key in the overtime win against Dartmouth. I didn't realize that he was back so far. I thought, I remembered that he was just shot it from the top of the key, but he was back actually like where the NBA three-point line is now.
One of the redeeming things for us that made the year extra special, not that it wasn't really special anyway, was the fact that we then had the opportunity to play a Red Cross benefit game against the winner of the NIT tournament, which was the tournament that we'd lost in. So we were able to have an opportunity to redeem that loss and play the winner of that tournament, which was St. John's, which we did, and won that game.
It was a unique situation to, in effect, win both the NCAA and the NIT in the same year. They didn't win the NIT, but they beat the team that won the NIT.
It kind of gave you a sense that we'd won the NCAA championship and we defeated the winner of the NIT, which I guess we thought made us pretty special.